This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The Turkish army announced that it has killed 15 fighters from the Kurdistan Workers' Party in an offensive in southeastern Turkey along the Iraqi border. Meanwhile, Iraq's Foreign Minister Hoshyar Zubari said the Iraqi authorities staged more security checkpoints to restrain the deployment and mobility of Kurdish fighters and to cut off supplies to them. This news comes after the Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan accused the head of Iraq's Kurdistan region, Masoud Barzani, of harboring Kurdish fighters.
The
Turkish army continues to mass along the Iraqi border in search of PKK fighters. However, the massing has not escalated to the full-fledged war the army prepared itself for. According to incoming reports, the Turkish army has hit Kurdish targets in the region and is now focusing on cutting off supplies to Kurdish fighters who were reportedly stranded in mountainous areas. The army is trying to cut off the road to these fighters in order to prevent them from crossing to the other side of the border. While the Turkish army continues to mass near the border, Ankara is exerting efforts at the national and international levels in order to prevent the eruption of a full-fledged war, which will not be easy and is very risky. In addition, the timing is not in Ankara's best interest as the region is getting ready to embrace the winter season. Unlike PKK fighters, the Turkish army is not used to fighting under harsh weather conditions, especially in mountainous areas where heavy snow falls during the winter. Despite the Turkish government's efforts to rally public support for a military action against the PKK, some residents along the border hope for a peaceful solution. Meanwhile, Turkey's prime minister, who is expected to meet President Bush, demands an active role be played by Washington. The Turkish prime minister, who doesn't believe that Iraq's Kurds will provide a solution to the crisis, accused Masoud Barzani of harboring Kurdish fighters. Yesterday, Barzani urged Kurdish fighters to stop their armed operations against Turkey. Meanwhile, Iraq's foreign minister, Hoshyar Zubari, said that the Iraqi authority has staged more security checkpoints to restrain the mobility of Kurdish fighters and to cut off supplies to their hideouts in the mountains. Zubari added that he will continue to exert what he described as intensive efforts aimed at releasing those Turkish soldiers who were captured by the PKK.
Citizens of the Iraqi region of Kurdistan called on the Turkish government to hold diplomatic talks in order to resolve the crisis on the border between the two countries.
In interviews with Al-Iraqiya TV, they reiterated that resorting to a military solution to resolve the crisis will have a negative impact on the region.
Diplomatic efforts by the Iraqi government, the government of the Kurdistan region, and the international community continue in order to reach a mutual understanding between Turkey and Iraq, and to resolve the growing crisis on the border of these two countries. The Kurdistan public is hoping and calling for a peaceful resolution, especially since the two neighboring citizens have a strong relationship. These relations must continue without harm and without the sound of gunfire rising above the sound of dialogue, understanding, and peaceful coexistence.
We, the people of Kurdistan, are a peaceful people. I love peace, and I want peace for our neighbors too. If God forbid this war expands, or if a war begins between us and Turkey, Turkey will sustain a huge loss from the people of Kurdistan. We want peace for our neighbors and ourselves.
We have strong social ties between the people of the region, especially between the Turkish, Iraqi, and Kurdish people. Members of the same family sometimes live on different sides of the border, and they visit each other. We want peace with everyone. We have suffered a lot. Others have committed injustices against us. As a result, we have reached the conclusion that we must coexist with them. We hope that they see things the same way.
In the city of Dahuk, citizens said that the language of war will not resolve the current crisis, but rather it will complicate it even more, and that the era of war has ended, and the language of modern times is dialogue and peace.
War doesn't resolve anything. War only gives birth to more war. Violence creates more violence.
The era of war has ended. I believe that today all the problems of the world are being resolved through peaceful means. I hope that our Turkish brothers understand the Kurdish people's position because they are a role model and they want freedom and peace.
We as people living in the region of Kurdistan hope that peace remains permanently in this region. As Iraqi people, we have become tired of wars and consecutive crises. I hope that this crisis is resolved peacefully and that our relationship with our neighbors remains good, especially with Turkey, because we have mutual commercial interests and other interests as well. I hope that it will be resolved in a peaceful way.
The Kurdistan public believes that the relations with their Turkish neighbors are historic and strategic, and that they have mutual interests. This is the call for peace from the Kurdish people to the Turkish people and their government. This crisis needs to be resolved through peaceful means. Kurdish officials and the public reiterated that they have no hand in this crisis.
Al-Iraqiya, Dahuk.
تنفس العراقيون في سوريا صعداء قليلا بعدما حصل رئيس البرلمان.
Iraqis in Syria are breathing a small sigh of relief after the Iraqi Speaker of Parliament Mahmoud al-Mashhadani obtained a Syrian agreement which allows Iraqis to extend their stay in Syria at the border crossings, and it also allows families and businessmen to enter into Syria. Details in this report by Zuhair Ibrahim.
يبدو أن نفوس عائلة أبو محمد كما هو حال حوالي 1,800,000 عراقي يقيمون في سوريا.
It appears that Abu Muhammad's sigh of relief is shared by more than 1.8 million Iraqis who reside in Syria after authorities agreed to a request by the Iraqi Speaker of Parliament to allow them to extend their stay at border crossings. However, this relief is mixed with concern.
لا يزال مختلطا بالقلق.
وين أروح؟ أنا ما عندي ملجأ غير سوريا، هي بس سوريا اللي الملجأ لنا.
Where can I go? I have no refuge other than Syria. Syria is the only refuge for us. I can't return to Iraq and then have to leave again. This is it. Why did we flee from Iraq? From what did we flee? We fled the security situation in Iraq.
Most Iraqis in Syria have a hard time making a living and suffer from harsh living and health conditions. Because of this, they blame the Iraqi government for neglecting them, but have been temporarily satisfied that the Syrian authorities are widening the number of Iraqis allowed to enter the country, especially families.
وخاصة العوائل.
أقول لك يا بكل صراحة عايش بأدنى مستوى من المعيشة.
We are living within the most basic means. I don't even get my retirement pension. I have no other source of income except my pension, and I don't even get that.
أنا ما عندي عدا الراتب التقاعدي واللي ما بستلمه.
كل شيء ماكو من الحكومة العراقية أبداً.
We don't get anything from the Iraqi parliament. All we hear are statements from members of the Iraqi parliament and the government. It's a lot of hot air. Until this very hour, we have gotten nothing.
According to the Iraqi Speaker of Parliament, Mahmoud Mashhadani, the Syrian authorities agreed to welcome members of the Chamber of Commerce and Manufacturing, people with university degrees, and single-member households with an entrance fee of $50 per individual, as well as permission to immediately extend or renew their stay at the Syrian-Iraqi border. Zuhair Ibrahim, Al-Arabiya, Damascus.
زهير إبراهيم العربية دمشق.
After many bridges were destroyed in the Anbar province by U.S. forces during the battles which took place in the region, and after other bridges were designated solely for military transportation, Iraqis have begun to resort to using basic boats as a way of travel from one bank to the other. Details with Abdul Qadir Saadi.
These basic boats should be stored away and are rarely used, but the continued cutting cutting off of access to the bridges and their lack of renovation have made these boats one of the basic necessities of life for the residents of Anbar. It is the easiest way to travel from one bank of the Euphrates River to the other.
This bridge used to service the entire region. It was a public bridge in the Anbar province. The coalition forces came and bombed it. People suffered from a lack of transportation, so they bought these boats. But the supply of boats can't meet the demand.
One man's sorrow is another man's joy. This old form of transportation has become a source of income for those who own them, especially in areas that have witnessed relative peace. This form of transportation has returned and has been embraced by the Euphrates River, taking a role no less important than the bridges that the U.S. forces destroyed or designated solely for military vehicles.
We help citizens travel from one bank to the other. We help people who don't have anything. We help families. We transport sick people to the other bank.
However, this basic mode of transportation is not necessarily safe. This situation has compelled some people to raise their voices and appeal to consciences in order to reconstruct the bridges and to prevent any danger associated with using these boats to travel and transport their belongings. After bridges have been cut off, thus multiplying the suffering of citizens, the only available form of transportation is the boat. From the Anbar province, Abdul Qadir Sadi, Al-Arabiya.
من محافظة الأنبار عبد القادر سعدي العربية.
In tonight's lead story, President Shimon Peres says Israel will not ease its pressure on the Gaza Strip. The president was touring the southern Negev town of Sderot today as a gesture of solidarity with residents who continue to face daily Qassam rocket attacks at the hands of Palestinian terrorists. Peres said Israel has stepped up its pressure over the past several weeks and has, in his words, prevented many potential tragedies. The president added that the situation in Gaza is deteriorating not because of Israel, but because of Hamas, which is losing the support of the Palestinian people. Reporters asked the president about this week's decision by the Attorney General ruling out punitive measures such as power cuts to Gaza. Peres stressed this does not mean that Israel is obliged to maintain economic and trade ties with Gaza in the face of continuing Palestinian rocket attacks.
Repercussions over yesterday's riots in the Galilee Druze village of Ki'in continue today, with MKs calling for a Knesset investigation, even as the police have opened their own probe into what occurred. IBA's Eli Wogelenter has this report.
The internal police investigation into the riots yesterday in the Druze village of Ki'in began this morning. Police are looking into the sequence of events that ended with 27 police officers and 10 civilians being injured when villagers were protesting the erection of a cell phone antenna. But a day after the riot in the Galilee village, and 7 years after the October riots of 2000, in which 13 Israeli Arabs were killed in clashes with police, Knesset members are once again asking difficult questions about police conduct. MK Yisrael Chasson, a former Shin Bet deputy, is demanding a parliamentary committee examine whether police acted appropriately by sending hundreds of officers to Pekin. I'm astounded by the police conduct, Chasson said. The incident in Pekin is not isolated. Such incidents have already taken place in the past. Knesset Internal Committee Chairman Ofer Pinas Paz also criticized the police, as well as the behavior of residents against the officers. In Pekin, there was serious violence against police, and I condemn all violence against law enforcers, said Pinas Paz. But I cannot agree in any way with the police use of live ammunition against protesters. He added that when residents of Ramat Gan and Givatayim had previously set fire to phone antennas, no one considered using live ammunition against them. And Tel Aviv University professor Shimon Shamir, a member of the Or Commission of Inquiry into the October 2000 riots, told the Jerusalem Post that the recommendations made in the commission's report were not followed by the police. For example, we wrote that when there was a tense situation inside a village, the first thing the police should do is talk with village leaders and not enter it with force, Shamir said. There should be no such thing as opening fire with live ammunition against civilians. If the police feel they have to shoot to defend themselves, They should leave the village, wait for matters to calm down, and then go in. Eli Wogelanter, IBA News.
A foiled terror attack in Hebron today. Border police arrested an 18-year-old Arab terrorist who was in possession of 2 knives, a revolver, and a letter indicating that he planned to carry out a suicide attack. The man was taken into police custody.
Likud Knesset member Silvan Shalom says that he's won the support of 52 legislators for a bill that would require a national referendum prior to the relinquishment by Israel of any territory in Jerusalem. And in other Knesset news today, the House approved the preliminary reading of a bill that would ban Israelis who have visited enemy countries without permission from running for Knesset. The bill was proposed by NRP leaders Zvulun Orlev and National Union MK Serena Tartman. Left-wing MKs charge the bill is racist and aimed at Arab Knesset members, several of whom have repeatedly defied the government by visiting Syria.
استشهد 6 مواطنين في اعتداءات نفذها جيش الاحتلال.
Less than 24 hours ago, 6 citizens were martyred in attacks by the occupation army and special operations unit in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, the Israeli Defense Minister Ehud Barak imposed new sanctions on Gaza, including the cutting off of electricity and delaying entrance into the Strip.
Citizens have become familiar with these scenes of killing, destruction, siege, and closures. The Israeli occupation army insisted on leaving behind horrific injuries on unarmed civilians. It did so this time by randomly shelling the region of Kliabu, east of Sheikh Zayed Towers in northern Gaza Strip. The Israeli fire struck the young boys, Muhammad Kaloub and Abdu Abu Askar, fatally injuring them. Even this young child could not look at the 2 martyrs due to the horrific magnitude of their injuries caused by the occupation, which has no consideration towards human feelings. The family of the 2 martyrs said their goodbyes to their loved ones with cries of anger, pain, and condemnation of these continued crimes.
The Israelis fired 1 missile, then they fired another missile and hit them. The boys' bodies were torn apart. May God have mercy on them. May God protect us from the Jews. May God make us patient and make the mother of the other boy patient. What else can we say?
Hours later, the occupation martyred 2 other people during an incursion in the Abassana village in the eastern region of Khan Yunis province. The 2 martyrs, Ahmed Tabash and Ayman Fusaifis, died of multiple gunshot wounds throughout their bodies. This happened during an incursion by the Israeli special forces under the cover of night that carried out an aggressive terrorist operation against unarmed civilians living in the eastern part of the village. 2 other martyrs, Muhammad Abed and Muhammad Kurdi, were killed near the Eli Seni Free Zone, northeast of Beit Lahia village. The Israeli soldiers surprised them with gunfire as they became among the 6 people who were martyred in less than 24 hours. Bulldozing operations were conducted in vast areas of the Fakhari village, northwest of Khan Yunis, particularly in the northeastern part of the village. In the Farahin area, citizens feared an anticipated incursion by the occupation forces in the region due to intensified movements in the area similar to what happened last week. The Israeli Minister of Defense Ehud Barak even ordered reducing the transfer of oil, electricity, and needed supplies into the Gaza Strip. He also ordered the Beit Hanun Eretz and Karni crossings to be closed for longer periods of time so that the Gaza Strip could be turned into a huge prison.
Terrorism and peace are among some of the hot topics dominating the world today. The Arab world and its problems are at the top of the Saudi king's agenda. Saudi Arabia's king, Abdullah bin Abd Aziz, arrived yesterday in London on a 3-day tour of the United Kingdom. Bin Abd Aziz is expected to meet today with Britain's Prime Minister Gordon Brown. Yesterday, a dinner was held in his honor at Buckingham Palace. Syed Salam reports.
الأولى لملك سعودي منذ 20 عاما زيارة خادم الحرمين الشريفين الملك عبد الله بن عبد العزيز إلى بريطانيا.
This is the first visit in 20 years by a Saudi king to Britain. The servant of the two holy sanctuary harems, King Abdallah bin Abdulaziz, arrived on Monday in Britain, where he received a warm reception by Queen Elizabeth II. Senior British officials joined the king for dinner at the Buckingham Palace. The king and the queen exchanged political messages during their opening speeches at the dinner table.
We also continue to work together against
We will also continue to work together to fight against terrorism, which is threatening the lives of the people in both our countries. We appreciate the role taken by the Saudi Kingdom in its search for a peaceful solution to the Arab-Israeli conflict. In particular, Your Majesty's personal contribution through the Arab Peace Initiative.
The servant of the two holy harems, King Abdallah bin Abdulaziz, began his speech with the word peace. In his opening remarks, the king praised Britain for its religious tolerance and said that dialogue is the only way to resolve the world's conflicts, including the Palestinian problem.
وإنني على ثقة إننا سنجد حكومة جلالتك.
I'm very confident that we'll find the government of Your Majesty very helpful in ending the suffering of our Palestinian brothers through a real peace initiative that will help protect the rights of all parties.
يصون حقوق كل الأطراف.
The Saudi monarch, who plans to spend his 3-day visit at the Buckingham Palace, is expected to meet today with Britain's Prime Minister Gordon Brown. The two leaders are expected to discuss several hot topics, including counterterrorism, the Iranian nuclear program, the Mideast peace process, and the Iraqi and Lebanese files.
Leader of the Islamic Revolution says a bright and promising prospect awaits the Iranian nation. In an address to the thousands of school and university students member Basij volunteer forces on Wednesday, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei underscored that the nation's dignity, independence, and might are dependent on boosting perseverance, faith, and scientific efforts, alongside national solidarity and unity between the nation and the government. Ayatollah Khamenei noted that the U.S. opposition to Iranian nuclear program arises from the fundamental fact that Washington cannot tolerate the nation's scientific progress since, as he added, a nation acquiring scientific power can no longer be bullied. Elsewhere in his remarks, the leader ruled out as sheer lies Iran's alleged involvement in the attacks against U.S. troops in Iraq. Ayatollah Khamenei added, the Bush administration is under fire both at home and abroad for its wrong policies, so it is desperately accusing Iran. The leader concluded the U.S. interventionist policies have caused insecurity in the Middle East region, namely Iraq, Palestine, and Lebanon. President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad says the Tuesday visit by the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has been scheduled to follow up an agreement made during President Putin's October trip to Tehran. Speaking to reporters on Wednesday, President Ahmadinejad stressed that dividing the Caspian Sea was not on the agenda at the Second Caspian Summit, and such an issue is devoid of any legal value at all. Elsewhere in his remarks, the president added he will attend the third OPEC summit in Saudi Arabia later this month. Meanwhile, in the day, the chief executive, in a letter to the parliament, named caretaker Minister of Industries and Mines Ali Akbar Mehrabian and acting oil minister Ghulam Hossein Nozari as his official nominees for the posts. Foreign Minister Mansour Motegi has urged further convergence of approaches between Tehran and Baghdad in the upcoming meeting of Iraq neighbors in Istanbul, Turkey. The top diplomat told Iraqi President Jalal Talabani in Baghdad that the Islamic Republic is ready to present a modality plan for restoration of security to the war-torn Iraq. On his part, the Iraqi president thanked Iran's diplomatic efforts to that cause, as well as Tehran's economic and trade contributions to his country, and said Iran, as a close friend for the Iraqi nation, has a great role to play to help restoration of stability in Iraq. Meanwhile, the visiting Iranian top diplomat sat down for talks with the Iraqi Prime Minister, Nouri al-Maliki, where the latter called for enhancement of the bilateral trade exchanges. The Prime Minister of Iraq urged collaborative efforts in the global campaign against terrorist groups who abuse Iraq territory to dent Baghdad relations with its neighbors. Earlier on Wednesday, the Iranian foreign minister, in a joint press conference with his Iraqi counterpart, Bashar Zebari, called for release of Iranian diplomats detained by U.S. occupation forces in Iraq. Motaki left Baghdad for Tehran hours ago. Defense Minister Mustafa Mohammad Najjar says Iran's armed forces are fully prepared to safeguard the territorial integrity of the country. Najjar told reporters on the sidelines of a cabinet session, imposing unilateral sanctions on Iran is solely a psychological warfare. He noted that Iran has made huge defense achievements even when sanctions have been levied on the country. Meanwhile, the commander of the Islamic Revolution Guards Corps, IRGC, Major General Mohammad Ali Jafari, said IRGC forces are at highest level of readiness, both physically and spiritually. He added, the IRGC is also armed with the state-of-the-art defensive equipment. An international anti-drugs conference opened in Afghanistan today with an appeal for regional cooperation in the battle against the production and trafficking of opium in Central Asia. According to the UN, Afghan opium production has risen more than a third to a record high in the year 2007, making the country the world's exclusive supplier of opium. Despite the U.S. propaganda for their fight against cultivation of opium in Afghanistan, experts say nothing has been done for opium farmers who are battling with poverty and have no money to survive.
Neither the government of Afghanistan nor the international community has been successful in that. We have to say, our strategies have failed.
The figures are staggering. Opium production accounts for more than a third of total economic activity in Afghanistan, employs 14% of the population, and contributes 93% of the world's supply.
Hi, I'm Jamal, Dajani, producer of the show you've just been watching, Mosaic, World News from the Middle East. Just a short while ago, we came to you asking for your help to keep Mosaic on the air. We needed to raise $200,000, and I'm happy to announce that we did it. No, as a matter of fact, you did it. More than 1,600 of you helped us to reach our goal, and I want to thank you on behalf of the Mosaic team right here at Link TV for your support. Stay informed, keep watching, and thank you again.
One nation, many voices. The stories of Muslims in America. At work, at play, having fun. What is life like for the millions of people in this country who practice Islam?
And then finally I looked in my heart, and there he was. Even today, Muslims still reciting.
Kind of in limbo.
Now's your chance to share stories of Muslims in America in our One Nation, Many Voices online film contest. We're awarding $50,000 in cash prizes divided among 6 categories: comedy, drama, documentary, animation or music, a special category for filmmakers 18 and under, plus films under 60 seconds long. You don't have to be a Muslim to enter or to vote for your favorite films online. You just have to live in the United States. The deadline for entries is November 25th, 2007, so hurry. Check out details at linktv.org/onenation. One Nation, Many Voices. Muslims in America. Stories, not stereotypes.
Get more news about the Middle East online at linktv.org/mosaic. The Mosaic webpage offers a complete archive of Mosaic programs, program transcripts, the Mosaic video podcast, and the Mosaic Intelligence Report, a weekly analysis of the hottest stories from the Middle East. The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.